Welcome to Lizzie's Workshop and this episode of Mixed Media Monday. Today I am pulling together all kinds of collage pieces and mixing a whole bunch of components together, and I'm starting off with this piece of scrapbooking paper. I used this scrapbooking paper for the cards for my daughter's birthday invitations, and so that was what was left over. And I'm starting in a brand new, clean, pristine art journal today, which is not something that usually happens. It is the beginning of the year, and so that is what I am doing. I'm starting in a brand new book. So all I'm doing is randomly placing all these pieces. Now, because it's scrapbooking paper and it's one of those pages or the card stocks that have a lot of texture to them, they are absorbing a lot of the matte medium, and so I have to put matte medium on the base layer and then on the back of the piece of paper and then over the top of the piece of paper to get it to go down nice and smooth and solidly. And I'm going to use a lot of this matte medium today because I want to empty out that little container. It's still from 2015, which it was only the day before yesterday, but I did want to get that all cleaned out and make a new jar so that I have the fresh stuff going at all times. So as you can see, there's really no rhyme or reason as to how I'm putting these on there. I'm just breaking up the white, and I'm not usually intimidated by white. I wasn't today, but that's usually how I start, is by creating some sort of collage. And quite often the collage will dictate some of the colors that go into the project later on throughout. So I don't really love this paisley paper stuff, but my daughter really enjoyed it and it was sitting there. So it got the express opportunity to be the first collage of the year. It's kind of a privilege for the paper. And so I'm trying to use up all the paper that I ripped up because I don't want to have to try and find one or two places for one or two pieces later on in the future. So all I'm doing is making sure I use it all up in this one project. So once I have everything glued on in separate places, I'm kind of overlapping some of them now, and some of them have the white edge because of how I ripped, and some of them have the mostly dark edges. So I'm just kind of mixing and matching that throughout the page as I'm using up the papers. Other than that, I'm not overly concerned about what's happening. So once this is all done, like I said, I wanted to use up the rest of that matte medium. And so what I do is I take the jar and I put this layer over the entire thing, and that seals in whatever paper is exposed. It's kind of like a gesso idea, but it seals in the page underneath. Now I've created this base that if I want to use wet mediums over top, I don't have to worry about them bleeding through to the other side. It's an acrylic medium, right? Sort of like a gesso. And so that's what that gives me. So I just kind of take it off and I'm emptying it out and dispersing it all over the thing. And because these scrapbooking pages are so nice and absorbent, they're just sucking it all up. So this is the box that my brand new calendar came in. It is a legacy calendar and the imagery is by Mandy Lynn. It's for a 2016 calendar. So this is just the box. So I wanted to do something with it. I didn't want to, you know how it is for a mixed media artist, you don't want to throw anything away. So I'm taking my scalpel and I am going and cutting around all the details because I just wanted the bicycle. I didn't want the wall in the background. And I will go all throughout the whole thing, but I think I edited out a lot of this part of the video because it wasn't that interesting to me anyways. And it's just kind of all the same thing, very carefully fussy cutting with a scalpel. So this video or this project took me about an hour and 45 minutes, not including the time I left it to dry overnight because once I glued the bike on. So crafting time, it took me about an hour and a half to an hour and 45 minutes. And so when you're editing an hour and 45 minutes down to, less than half an hour, you kind of have to decide what's going to be kept and what's going to be removed. I could just play it as an hour and 45-minute video, but that takes a lot of your time, a lot of my time, and I don't know, I have a limited watching time ability, and so I kind of feel like I should ease up on you as my viewers and try to stick to videos that are half an hour or less. That's usually what I aim for anyways. It used to be 10-minute videos that I aimed for, and now that I'm creating more complex projects, it's about 15 to half an hour videos. So I do cut out the rest of this, and I go back to the part that I found most interesting that I know you'll probably have questions about, and that is cutting a circle with a scalpel. How am I cutting such a nice smooth circle? And notice how my wrist is staying the same, and I'm moving my whole body in order to get the right curve. I'm not moving from the elbow, I'm not moving from the wrist, I was moving from my whole body, and that's why I had to turn the page so I could turn my whole body back to the table. And I got a nice smooth round circle from that. So now that this is such thickly layered with the matte medium, I had to dry it. I took all the drying time out so you wouldn't have to watch that. And my next step is going to be pulling color from the background, or thinking about color that I'm going to pull from the background. But in order to do that, I'm first going to put some gesso on there to dull the vibrancy of the scrapbooking paper. Now, the first time I did this, it didn't work out all that well. It didn't work out like I wanted it to be. I wanted it to kind of be a little bit of a wash, but that's not what I ended up with. I ended up with, stagnant, or, like little bits and pieces of white, and mostly the gesso went into the white space and not onto the blue scrapbooking paper. So I had to do it again. So now that I've got it on there for the second time, I'm going to dry it a little bit so that the gesso is a little bit thicker, so it will spread more thickly rather than in a quite sheer coat. It's going to be a little bit more opaque when I roll over it. I didn't dry it totally, I just dried it a little bit to thicken up the top layer of the paint. If you go too much, you're going to end up with a plasticky surface to the spatters, and it's not going to do what you want it to do. So it's just a touch of heat, not too much. So the next thing I'm going to do is, I found this beautiful stencil in the, I think, home decor section at Michael's, and I'm addicted to stencils. Hello, my name is Lizzie Sin. I'm addicted to stencils. So I had to buy this stencil in the home decor department at Michael's, and then I grabbed my Prima chalkboard paint, and the color of this one is jewel blue. And I put it through that stencil, and oh, how did I just love that stencil. And I wanted to use the stencil over the entire page. And then I got to thinking, well, then why did I use the scrapbooking paper if I just wanted this pattern everywhere? So I decided I wasn't going to use it everywhere. I was going to chill, calm down, and I would just use it sporadically over the page, which I still get a lot of coverage out of it, I'm not going to lie. But at the same time, I do still allow that scrapbooking paper to come through. So I didn't go totally crazy with the stencil like I wanted to, which I'm glad about after the fact. So I was going through the stencil and I realized that I was getting really hard edges from my rectangular sponge, and so I had to go swirling around the edges of things, which softened up the edges so that it wasn't like hard cut square on this nice curvilinear type of design with, there's corners, but if there's a corner in the middle of the curvy shape, that kind of looks awkward. So I did just swirl around the edges once I got the colors in that I wanted to soften them up a little bit and kind of ghost them. And that's with a mostly light hand and a mostly dry sponge that I soften those edges. So this type of thing, this type of stencil, it moves as you go. So they're not perfect. The stencil I did job wasn't perfect, and that's okay. This is mixed media. We're having fun. It's all good. But I decided that the white space was not what I wanted. So I pulled this Neocolor 2 crayon out, and the color is Purple Violet, and it sort of matched one of the colors in the scrapbooking paper, and that's why I chose it, is because it did match that. And I just kind of filled in the spaces. I scribbled everywhere, and then I took this raunchy old elementary school paintbrush from my grandmother's stash, and I filled that up. But if you can see in some areas the water's pooling, and I thought, I'm okay with that. That's chill, it's cool. But I don't want the pooling water. I'm going to take those pooling spots and spread them around. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to take my pipette, or pipette, whatever you want to call it, and I'm going to take those little pools of water and I'm going to spatter them over top of the blue, because I didn't want them to cover the blue, but the blue against the purple was really, really nice. And so I spattered all those pools of purple Neocolor 2, and I spattered them across the blue to disperse them. And I like that. So Neocolor 2, one of the things that I absolutely adore about them is that they are constantly movable. You can always move them, even once they dry. But today I hit this with the heat gun for quite a while to dry all the water that was on the page, and that made them semi-permanent. So if I took my raunchy old watercolor brush and I scrubbed at it, then yes, the purple would move. But it's not going to move if I just want to run a brush lightly over top of it and seal it all in. And that's what I end up doing. I take my golden heavy matte gel as glue to glue on all the little fine points of the bicycle. And then once that's all done, I'm going to take my matte medium once again, and I'm going to grab a nice big fat brush, and I'm going to put another layer of that matte medium on there, because I intend to use my Stabilo all black, and I didn't want the purple moving where the black was. I also wanted to make sure that this bike was firmly glued down, so I rolled it all down and I used 3D heavy gel. But after it started to dry, it wasn't quite as attached as I wanted it to be in all the fine little points, and so using the matte medium allowed me to achieve that. So matte medium is very, very sticky, and it dries really, really fast. Sorry, the heavy matte gel. It dries really, really fast. So first I was using one of my little spatulas for it. And then I decided to switch to a paintbrush because I saw one of my friends using a paintbrush with it the other day, and I just wasn't happy with it. So now I'm doing the heavy brush with the matte medium to make sure that everything's sealed in properly. I probably could have gotten away with just gluing it down with the heavy gel, but I just wasn't content with how it was turning out. And then I was getting sticky spots across the top of the bicycle, and that wasn't making me very happy either. So I decided that I would just seal it all in with the matte medium and be done with it. And this, I went and did a different project, and I let this, once I finished the next step, I let it rest overnight to dry completely so that everything would be good to use my water-based elements to the next day. So if you can see how I'm using that brush there, I'm just tucking a surplus of it along the edges of the piece of paper, and that allows the paper to, as it dries, to suck it all in and to be firmly adhered to the page, and it's not going to be, there's nothing that's going to lift, it's all just going to be nice and right there. The next thing I'm doing is I'm attaching some dictionary chunks to the book. The first one there, that is the definition of brave, all the way down to the definition of bravery. And the next one's going to be strong, and another one is consistent, and another one is undaunted, and the last one is determination. Now, this is the first page of 2016, and that's part of the reason why I chose strong words. I wanted them to look like newspapers flying out of the basket, and the word being spread everywhere that this is going to be the year of being strong and brave and consistent, and of being determined and undaunted, and that I'm going to take these words and I'm going to spread them everywhere. I'm going to run with them. I'm going places. And that's the title that I end up putting on this piece, is Going Places. So because, as you've probably heard through many of my videos, there are a lot of things that are changing this year for my whole family. And so I wanted this first piece to focus on that so that I could just kind of take it off of the list of things to think about. So now I'm taking my black Stabilo All pencil, and I'm going around where the shadow would be, the shadow lines. So that means bottom and right. And that's a typical direction for me. That's how I see shadow. that's how I see the light source is almost always coming from the top left. And so I almost always do my shadow from on the bottom and right of objects. Now, one of the things I want to do this year is challenge myself with changing the location of my light source, 2 different corners around the page. So I'm going to try really hard this year to do sometimes the shadow, to be the top left, and sometimes to be the bottom left, and sometimes to be the top right. But for this one, I'm just going off of what I am comfortable and easygoing, because this page is talking about I'm busy, I'm in a rush, I'm spreading the word, I'm out the door kind of thing. It's busy. So this page, once it is finished, I don't feel like it is totally finished because I didn't go over it with my black Pitt pen, and that's one of the things that I kind of have as a signifier that says I'm finished traditionally or in the past. And so with this one, I didn't do that with the Pitt pen, and so I'm kind of happy that I didn't, because it makes me think that or it emphasizes that whole theory that I'm going places, that I'm busy, that we're moving quickly, because I didn't pay attention to all the teeny tiny little details of things. And I really like that about this page once it's done. So once I went through with everything with my Stabilo pencil, I go through with my water barrel paintbrush, and I make a little bit wet line beside, and then I pull the black into my wet line, so that I'm getting like a ghost line. I'm not getting a firm black line, I'm getting a ghost line. And if I just go and activate it right up close to the line, then it's going to be a nice dark line with just a little tiny bit of smudge out the outside edge. But if I put a ghost puddle, so to speak, next to it and then pull it into the puddle, then I get this whole this shadow that is movable. It's not going to be a hard edge shadow. It's going to be something that's kind of a ghost shadow, and I really like that effect with these Stabilols. Now, one thing I sometimes do is I get too much water into the barrel, into the brush head of my brush, and I end up making a nice big black puddle where there should not necessarily be a big black puddle. And so with this one, I have that right there under the basket, and it's really easy to fix that. You can either continue to push the ink around and move it around your project like this, or you can say, you know what, that's just too much, and you take a nice fine-tipped water brush and there, you pull it off, smooth out the edges, pull off the excess, and it sucks it right up all nicely. And that's what I did. So I just went around all those lines, and when I was done, I went and decided I was going to do the papers too, the definitions, because I wanted them to look kind of like newspapers flying out of there. So I took the Stabilo all and I went around the outside edge of each one, and there are 5 odd numbers, right? Go around the outside edge of each one, and then I take my water brush and I squeezed a little thing of water there so that it would ghost. Nice, firm, solid black line along the edge, and then I want it ghosting over the whole thing like a newspaper. I know the paper is nice and old and it kind of looks newspaperish already, but once this dries, it's going to give me the effect exactly as I'm looking for it. And it'll tie all into the whole color scheme of the project after that. Sometimes I have to wash the brush off because I get too much black on there and I can't achieve the effects I want, but you just dab it off on a paper towel and you keep on going. So now that I've got all that black on there, I decide I'm going to dry the black, suck up some of the extra stuff like I had to by the basket, and once that's done, I'm going to do the spokes of the tires, and that's a finer tip brush. I was using a little bit fatter of a brush, I think a medium for everything else, and this is going to be the fine point because I just want that fine line activated there. And now that I think about it, maybe I could have left those unactivated, but I think it worked out okay. So I have this cold that I got from my son. It was a nice nice New Year's present. So once I'm done with all this black, I decide that I need to offset the amount of black with a little bit of white. Now, black gives you shadow, white gives you highlight. So the opposite edges of where I have my shadow is where I'm going to put my highlights. And I'm just going to run around the edge of things with the white pencil, and then I'm going to activate it and smooth it out, and it's going to kind of give me a bit of a 3D effect, like the bicycles coming off the page. And I'm going to activate that with the medium-sized brush once again. Now where I did the spokes, it's still wet. I haven't hit it with the heat gun or anything. So instead of drawing in white and contaminating the tip of my pencil, which isn't difficult to fix, but instead of having to fuss around with that, I decided I was just going to take the brush off the tip of the pencil, and then I would just pull the white off there and put it directly on so that I don't have to deal with any of the other stuff where I'm contaminating the tip of the pencil and having to scribble it off and stuff like that. So there we go, some nice shadow, some nice highlight, and we've pretty much got everything in there. So once I get all the level of white in there that I'm looking for, I can move on to my next step. And that's going to be my title. And I really like writing my own titles. I'm not a fancy lettering type of person. Someday I will practice and you know, get a little bit more fancy with that. But I just use whatever I have in my toolbox, which is my hands and my pencil. So I just kind of drew it in there, and willy-nilly, however it goes, we're set, right? The nice thing about this is that with this pencil, I could have just taken some white, it's a water brush, and got it wet and wiped it right off if I wanted to, or take a baby wipe and wipe it right off. So now I'm activating it with the brush. I fill it all in. I later decide that's not what I want, but I just cloud it like I did with the other pieces and let it fill in with the black from the Stabilo, and then we're set. Throughout this part of the process, I did have to wipe off my brush a couple times because it was getting a little bit too dark. And then you want to keep your hand off the page and your little pinky off the page while you do this so that nothing smudges. I'm kind of holding my pen like a cup of tea. And then to finish off the piece, I decided I needed a bit of a border. So I just took that black Stabilo and I went around the border and kind of smudged it up. And I wanted your eye to stay focused in the center of the page, and so that's why I did that. Otherwise, I could have just left it. I pondered putting in some stamping and I pondered some other stuff, but this is where the direction that I ended up going, and I'm happy with it. So once again, I'm puddling beside the line, and then I'm pulling the concentration of color into the puddle so that I get about a bit of a ghosty effect along that line. And then I decided to take a fatter brush so I could get a less defined edge on the border and ghost it a little bit more by adding quite a bit more water to the whole project. Once all of the border is liquefied and activated and moving the way I want it to move, I'm going to hit the whole thing with my heat gun, and everything is going to be all nice and solid once I'm done that. And as I'm drawing this, I'm looking at it going, there's something a little bit wrong here, something that's not quite balancing the way it needs to balance. And I decide that I don't really like how black I filled in that word going. And so I'm gonna go back to that, and I'm going to grab my Faber-Castell Pit Artist pen in white. It's the nice big fat one, and I'm going to fill in the going with that, with the block letters. Now as you do that, a little bit of the black does come off and you contaminate the tip of your marker. So you need to have a piece of paper off to the side that you can wipe and get the black off. And I had to keep doing this over and over again because it was activating black as I was filling in with white. But it all worked out. You just have to be consistent and not allow it to dry on your tip. So here are your still life pictures. I'd like to thank you for watching this episode of Mixed Media Monday. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave me some comments. I love hearing from you. Thanks for watching Lizzie's Workshop.